Good afternoon and welcome to Studio One in the Isle of Man. Today is all about understanding esports, and I'm joined by two representatives from Digital Isle of Man. We have Chris Kissack, who's head of esports, and Lyle Wraxall, who's the chief executive. We would love to get your feedback and some comments from you as an audience this afternoon, so we are using Slido. There will be a couple of presentations, but you can drop your questions in throughout. So go to slido.com and use the hashtag esportsiom. Thanks very much. We'll hear from Chris.
Thanks, Laura. So, understanding esports. We're going to go through a number of sections. We're going to start with defining esports. We're going to talk about the history of esports. We talk about what games make up the esports ecosystem, how an esports organization is structured. We're also going to talk about the Isle of Man and how the Isle of Man is involved in esports, and that's where I'm going to hand over to Lyle. To begin with, it's really important to look at how esports is spelt. So this might seem trivial, but within an industry where authenticity is so important, this is an important factor. So we have esports, which means electronic sports, and it's spelt just the same as any other word, uppercase E at the beginning of a sentence and all lowercase. It is not spelled E-sports or E uppercase sports, and definitely not iSports. An easy way to remember that is it's not how you would spell email with an uppercase M. The reason I mention this is because it is so important as businesses are trying to engage in this industry and break into this industry. It's something that is seen as a sign of authenticity and understanding or lack of understanding. So how do you define esports? This is a fairly tricky one, as it's an industry which is continually evolving. But for this presentation, we're going to go with video games played competitively. So that could be online or at a LAN event. Now, esports is not new. It's been around for a very, very long time. It was only coined esports in the last 10, 15 years, beginning all the way back in the mid-70s, starting with games like Space Invaders. And back then, the prizes were not as grand as they are now. The most earliest recorded esports event, the prize was a subscription to Rolling Stones magazine. And Space Invaders was in fact one of the earliest competitive video game events that I actually attended in the early 80s. And we've moved on significantly now. So we've gone from internet cafes and tournaments in basements to filling huge stadiums, prize pools in the $30 million realm. And it's one of the most exciting and fastest growing industries at the moment. Now, esports is played on a multitude of systems. The majority of esports is played on high-end PCs, but it's not to say that they can't be played on consoles as well. So there's certain areas in games within the esports industry which are played on consoles, such as the fighting games. And as consoles become more advanced, you have more opportunities for the console players to be able to access and play in competitive esports. We also have esports on mobiles as well. So this is an exciting area for esports because it provides access to esports with a lower barrier of costs. Certain countries that struggle to get access to high-end PCs or high-end consoles, they're still afforded the opportunities to play on and compete in these titles just from a mobile device. It's important, especially on the Isle of Man, to talk about esports betting as well, and where esports betting falls into the world of esports. And there is a difference between the two, but there are also areas where esports and esports betting do collide. Now, esports is not slot games that have a video game character in it. Esports is not multiplayer casino games. And esports is definitely not virtual horse racing. But that's not to say that esports can't be bet on. So anybody who's spoken with me about esports or I've came to see them will recognize this quote. So taking part in esports is not gambling, but just like other sports, you can bet on the outcome of esports, just like football. So football is not gambling, playing football is not gambling, but you can bet on the outcome of a football match. And here's a really good quote from former Lookbox CEO. We know that esports betting is already massive and has the highest growth potential of any vertical, but it really feels like the wider gambling industry is starting to take esports seriously now. And that couldn't be any more from the truth. As you can see, these guys here, some of the world's biggest and most professional esports teams and professional players are sponsored by esports betting operators. And as some of you may know, some of the world's biggest and most successful esports betting operators are founded and have their headquarters here on the Isle of Man. So we're going to talk about the games, and obviously this plays a big part in esports. And these are the games that make up the esports industry. And this is not inclusive because there are so many games and there's so many new games coming out. I've tried to break this down into different categories. So we have FPSs. These are the first-person shooter games. Now, most of these titles are very violent in nature, but they also have an easier barrier of entry to play and understand. They have extremely high production value, and they can be played on different platforms, so consoles, mobiles, and PCs. Some of the recognized names that sponsor these titles and these tournaments, Monster Energy, the US Air Force. Then we have Mobas, and that's multiplayer online battle arenas. Now, these titles are considered the biggest games in the world of esports. They are extremely popular. They fill stadiums the same as they would if they were traditional sporting events or concerts. These games are more family friendly, so by their very nature then they attract a different type of sponsor. They do have a more difficult learning curve to understand them, but once you understand them, they generate extremely passionate fans. And they do have little in the way of opportunities for betting sponsors. Now, some of those sponsors would include MasterCard, there's a number of car manufacturers, Spotify. And then you have Battle Royales. So these are relatively new titles on the esports scene. Extremely rapid growth, cross-platform, which means that taking part in some of these titles from a casual player, you can play on both mobile, consoles, and PC and be playing on the same game. Extensive brand sponsorship. They present challenges to run as esports, considering some of the titles would have 100 players playing at once. But they're extremely popular. We can't talk about Battle Royales without talking about a title like Fortnight. And this is generally the title when I meet people for the first time and advise them that I work in esports. Usually the common reaction is, oh, you mean like Fortnite? And Fortnite is fairly new on the scene. It came pretty much out of nowhere, but has grown to be one of the most popular video games in recent history, with 350 million registered players. But Fortnite is not an esport. It's something commonly heard by those in the esports industry. It comes with a lot of challenges. It's modeled by its very nature because it constantly updates itself. It brings in changes to weapons. It adds new maps. And if you're trying to play professionally and that your meta or the universe or the game that you're playing is continuously changing, it brings with it a lot of challenges to continue to play at that professional level. It does play a part in the world of esports, but it also has many opportunities for brand sponsorship, for engaging young players to enter into the world of video games at quite an early and safe space compared to some of the other games. Then we've got collectible card games. So these are games like Hearthstone and Gwent, Magic the Gathering. These titles are free to play like a number of the other esports. They are very fun, very addictive, but they come with cross-play as well, so you don't need a high-end PC, you don't need the latest equipment, you can play them on mobile, you can play them on consoles. They relatively low-tech requirements, so there's not as much advanced graphics in these games to mean that you have to have the latest kit, which does give that easier barrier of entry for somebody that wants to break into playing an esport or a competitive video game. There's also a great example of individuals that have been really good in the poker scene, moving from professional poker into professional card games in the esports space. And also it's very diverse as well. So there's been examples of world champions in Hearthstone and other titles being female players as well. And then we have the fighting game community. So these are titles like Super Smash Brothers, Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter, Brawlhalla. Again, easier entry of understanding and play for these titles. A lot of people who maybe have not played video games for a very long time can remember back in the day when they did play these type of games. It's not to say that they don't have their advanced technical aspects as well when you become at a higher level player. The fighting game community is sometimes considered quite fringe in the world of esports. It has its own community. Fairly low prize pools, and the events sometimes are considered a little bit more underground and very grassroots. Unfortunately, these titles don't play great online because of the latency. So it does come with it, again, with a lot of other titles, it comes with its own challenges and barriers when playing these games as an esport. Then you have sports sims. So these are popular titles like FIFA, the NBA games. And these titles are, again, an easier barrier of entry than maybe some of the MOBA games. A lot of people from a younger age would have played these titles as well. They're easier to watch as well to understand what's going on. Multiple titles across different games. They can attract different sponsors as well because these games are genuinely not violent, so it gives a lot of comfort to different sponsors, and they can be played by all ages. And I mean, there's so many different titles that we could be here all afternoon to go over what's involved. Everything from Tetris, Madden games, even farming simulator titles have their own esports scenes. And new ones come on the market all the time. Here's an example of the top 10 esports games by prize pool for last year. Now, last year, obviously, with the pandemic was a little bit different, but if you can see that you've got Counter-Strike with $15.8 million in prize pool last year. The previous year to that, without the pandemic, the Dota prize pool for the international was around $37 million for that tournament. So the prize pools are, to some people that are learning about the esports, quite eye-opening, and they're continuing to grow. We're going to talk a little bit about the business of esports. So if we look at the esports revenue and trajectory, and there's a really good quote there. So the esports market was valued at just over $950 million in 2020. And if you can see the graphs there, this is continuing to grow with projections into the billions for years to come. And just to go back slightly, actually, that's not to be confused with the video game market. So you have video games, which obviously are really important in the world of esports, because with no video games, there would be no esports. But you've got the video game market, which is valued at $90 billion. So when you see a lot of quotes or see a lot of reports, it's important to ensure you differentiate between the two. Esports organizations are as big as professional football clubs and other sporting clubs as well. So on the screen here, you can see 3 of the most successful and popular esports orgs at the moment. So you've got 100 Thieves, and there's a photo there of their Cash App compound. And that's where they would train, they would produce their content. You've got FaZe Clan there, and FaZe Clan, if you hit their website, you would be sometimes mistaken to think you've landed on an apparel or a merchandising website, because their merchandising and their brand is so important to them. You've got Team Liquid down the bottom, who have a long-standing partnership with Marvel. So there's a lot of crossover between the 2 different brands. It's a really good example of 2 different brands coming together to produce some exciting marketing content and apparel. And here's some examples of different orgs, and new organizations are growing and coming to the scene all the time. behind an esports organization, you have administration, you've got team management, just the same way as I said, in a sports company, but also a traditional business. And here's an example, so an org that I follow quite closely, a Swedish organization called Godsent. They're sponsored by Samsung. You've got a betting operator, BetSafe, who sponsors them, and they're also sponsored by Bjorn Borg as well. So for illustrative purposes, because an org changes a lot of the time and they swap out players, but here's an example of how an esports organization is structured. So you have the CEO and the deputy up top, you've got head coaches, and then within that organization, an esports org can have players in different titles and different games. So it's not just a case of an esports org will have one team or one game. So as an example here, you've got a League of Legends team, and that League of Legends team will have a coach. You'll have a PUBG or PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds, and these teams can be based in different countries as well. And also these teams can have players which transfer out. You'll have some orgs which will sell their whole individual team playing for a different game as well. They'll have marketing departments, they'll have content creators, and as esports grows as an industry, there are more and more job opportunities within an org as well. So looking at how the esports ecosystem is made up, and we've done our best to try and show and graphically how an esports ecosystem is layered, and we've gone with a bit of a kind of a pizza model. So at the very bottom and the bottom layer, we've got Grassroots. So anybody who has met with me or spoken with me or heard me talk will have heard how important I believe the grassroots scene in esports is. So Grassroots is all about laying the foundations, supporting future talent. And here on the Isle of Man, we've been doing some great work in not only identifying these different grassroots scenes in different titles, but doing what we can to support these guys. And it's important from a grassroots point of view to show that we understand the authenticity of that, because when we're trying to engage with different businesses to come to the island, they will all look at what we're doing in our grassroots scene. So being able to showcase that is very important to the growth of what we're trying to do here. Above that, above the grassroots layer, you've got the channels. So this is how the esports events or the content which is created is being seen, and the most popular methods of delivering that is via platforms like Twitch and YouTube gaming, and now Facebook gaming coming on as well. And from an Isle of Man's point of view, we've got potential of relocating talent to the island who produce content for these. We've also most recently identified and helped local streaming talent be signed by some esports organizations off island. We've got the potential to host some conferences here. We've also got any grassroots events that has taken place already is streamed on these platforms. Above that, you've got the publishers. So these are the guys that either make the games and or publish the games as well. And these are obviously very important, because without these titles and without the publishers, there would be no titles to play on. So from an Isle of Man's point of view, we've got potential for these publishers and these developers to look to the island to locate their IP here. We've also got regulation, and obviously from an Isle of Man's point of view, we've got a really good track record in regulating different industries. We've got a great track record in regulating and licensing in the betting and the gambling world, and we are doing some great work behind the scenes on looking at where within the esports ecosystem, what areas can we look to regulate. And obviously there's structuring as well from a corporate service provider point of view. Then we've got the orgs, as we've talked about before. So potential offerings from an Isle of Man point of view. The Isle of Man can offer a safe training location from a team house or a boot camp or for their academy teams. We've got structuring again. So the slides just back there where we were talking about how an org is structured, there's lots of opportunities from a corporate structuring point of view to structure things in a little smarter way. And then we've got back office as well, because all of these players, these managers, these coaches, they all need to be paid. They need a payroll. They have various visa requirements as they're entering into different countries and playing in different tournaments. And then we've got the leagues and events. So within the world of esports, just like any other sport, you have leagues that the teams will play in, and escrow services plays a big part of that as well. So if you've got a prize pool or a prize money that you're paying out, with the esports industry being unregulated, there are histories and areas within the world of esports where prize money hasn't been paid out on time or hasn't been paid out in full. And looking at what we do as an island and what we've got good track record in managing the paying out of prize money and managing prize funds, I think we've got a fantastic opportunity to bring some value in that particular area in the world of esports. And obviously there's esports betting on these events as well. So as you can see, there's lots of brands and there's lots of opportunities for local businesses on the island to bring value to this fast-moving and exciting industry. So with that, we're going to move on to what opportunities there has been for the island and what we've done to date. So I'm going to hand over to Lyle to step through that one.
Thank you, Chris. And I think that Chris has done a really good outline of what esports is. I do hope that people found that interesting. I really just wanted to take a few moments to talk about what we're planning to do as Digital Isle of Man to support esports on the Isle of Man. I think our approach has been to take this into 4 chunks, and we saw one of the foundational chunks in Chris's esports pizza as well, so that being Grassroots. And as Chris has explained, Grassroots is incredibly important to this young, maturing industry, and they will be looking at what we're doing as an island and how we're supporting that grassroots community before they come to do any business with us. So that's something that I know Chris is passionate about, and it's something that us as Digital Isle of Man are passionate about supporting as well. Alongside that, we do need to start raising awareness of what we're doing on the Isle of Man, and there's some fantastic things happening on the island, and we'll continue to see more of that happen as well. So a whole work stream dedicated to making sure that the awareness of what we're doing on the island is really made clear across the globe. Education is also key. Events like today, and this is really going to be the first in a series of events, are going to be key in making sure that we on the island understand what esports are. We understand the ethos of it. We understand, the culture of the type of people that are working in this industry, and we understand, our businesses understand how to work with the industry in a way that works for us and works for them. So that's key for us as well. And finally, regulation. Again, Chris touched on this earlier. As an island, we've got a proven ability to help support industries with our fantastic regulation. That's a key part of what we've been looking at. So let's take a look at what we've done to past and what we're looking to do moving into the future. So starting with regulation, and I start there because that really has been the center of gravity that everything else has hung around. We started a working group back in 2019. We brought together a group of people both on island and off island that had expertise in this area. Chris being one of those, actually, from day one, was involved in the working group. And as a group, we tried to understand what esports was, firstly, and making sure that we heard everyone's point of view and we could understand what the ecosystem actually looks like and what that really means. We could see opportunities for the Isle of Man to support this sector, but we needed to make sure that we had a cohesive strategy that would bring all of this together. So through the course of just under a year, that group worked to create a strategy which was developed and completed about a year ago now. Moving on from that strategy, we were lucky enough to bring Chris on board into the digital team, who's been a fantastic ambassador for us in this space and has led the charge, if you like, to drive this forward. And one of the pillars around this was to create something we call the 10. And that's 10 influential and key businesses within the industry who span the ecosystem that are willing to work with us and explain to us what they see opportunities are for the esports sector globally, what they see some of the challenges that they might experience that might prohibit that growth, so that we can understand as an island and the ways we've worked with other industries, what can we do to support and perhaps remove some of those challenges and help them grow at a more sustainable pace moving forward. So these conversations are very much in progress at the moment. We've started a series of workshops with those companies and a series of meetings one-to-one as well, as we try to break this down and really understand what their needs are. Our hope is by the end of the year, we'll have a concept of what that looks like, a set of requirements, if you like, around what regulation could look like. And I keep using the word regulation. That's very aspirational at this point. It may not be regulation, it may be a code of conduct, it may be something else, but some way of helping their industry mature, legitimize, removing the bad actors, and making sure that they can move forward at a pace. And that's really what we're looking for. We'd like to have something in place in 2022, 2023, depending on the complexity of the needs and the challenges that we're looking to solve. If we move on to education, so Chris has been running around the island like crazy, meeting lots of different businesses, really given that one-to-one attention of what esports means, how they can get involved. We also need to broadcast out what we're doing much more, and this event is the first in a series, as I mentioned earlier, that's going to help get the message out there. This has been a very basic 101. As we move forward, we're going to have a more focused session of what esports means to local businesses. Off the back of that session, we'll run a series of workshops with businesses on the island to have a two-way conversation about how they can get involved, what products they think they can bring to the market, what products we've seen by talking to the industry might be suitable, and really kind of help create a bit of a product list and opportunities for people to get involved. That engagement with local businesses will continue, much as it does across our other sectors. But really at the moment, it's about us all working together, pulling together, and understanding what it is we're doing as an island, and making sure we keep that consistent. We need to drive awareness. We started this a year ago with the virtual TT event, which is not a true esports event, but it really started demonstrating what we could do, where we used the TT game to have some fun around our sort of virtual TT series that went out around the time of last year's TT. Chris has been a panelist on a number of different panels since then. Unfortunately, virtually due to the pandemic, but we do expect that as soon as we are able to, that we'll be going out there and having face-to-face panels and sessions. And a lot of what we're trying to do is build trust with the sector, and that is going to be so much easier face-to-face. We are looking to engage with and partner with a esports business outlet, and that's in Esports Insider. And what we'd like to do is really help them document the journey and the conversation we're having with the 10. Not every conversation will be fit for publication, but I think it's really important that it doesn't seem to be too secretive, and that we're explaining what kind of challenges we're talking about, what the themes are, and perhaps get some discussion more broadly than just the 10 around what could drive this sector forward as we move forward. And again, we're going to keep ongoing engagement and keep raising that awareness. And then, finally, the bit that really underpins it, and the bit that we've done quite a bit of work on, especially Chris, really driving the grassroots piece moving forward. So we've seen a couple of Smash Brothers events that have happened on the island. We've had our first on-island org established already, which is fantastic news. We have a Isle of Man Esports Association that's been formed and planning what they're looking to move forward into as well. And interestingly, one of the areas that we thought we would not really be focused on, esports tournaments, due to the amount of work that's happened, the awareness that's been raised, the success we've had in grassroots, we actually have an opportunity to bring a tournament to the island as well. We're not sure when that's going to be yet. Could be the end of this year, could be next year. But a fantastic coup for us to even be having those conversations. Again, something we weren't really actively seeking, but due to the success to date, that's brilliant news. And we will continue to support and encourage that grassroots area, not just through the length of this program, but way beyond, because it is so critical to what we're doing. So I do hope that gives a kind of view of what kind of things we're doing in esports and Digital Isle of Man, how much work has happened to date, and we really do look forward to driving this program forward and getting even more involved as esports, as we hope the Isle of Man becomes a centre of gravity for the esports sector as we move forward.
Thank you, Lyle. Thank you, Chris. That was really interesting. I mean, I know it's something that you guys could probably talk for hours about and are very passionate about, which obviously comes across. But I think there's something really great about kind of going over the 101, getting back to basics and bringing everyone with us on this journey, because it is obviously a completely new sector. Just as a reminder for everyone who's watching, we are inviting questions from Slido. It's been popping up throughout the presentations, but you can go to slido.com and use the hashtag esportsiom. Drop any questions that you've got in for the guys. I guess from my point of view, to start us off, Chris, you've talked a lot about grassroots. You've also talked about what's happening globally around the world and in the kind of emerging sector. But what is currently happening in the Isle of Man here?
Okay, a lot. There's just so much going on, some amazing things happening. We've got local tournaments. There's like the guys from Manx Esports who are running Super Smash Brothers tournaments and really engaging with not just parents but younger players as well and giving them a safe space. And some of the things that we were able to do as an island, which was amazing during lockdown, when the rest of the world was, being affected sadly by COVID, the Isle of Man was in a position that it could run LAN events, and we've capitalised on that and continued to do that. We've got anybody who follows me on my LinkedIn will see that we have a local lad who's recently signed by a London Esports Organisation, which is amazing, gives us a really good spotlight on potential location for talent. We've got a local professional esports organisation, which is doing amazingly well, the X7 guys. It's too much to go into, and I've had to rein myself in a lot on this presentation, because anybody who knows me knows that I'm very passionate and excited about not just esports, but what's happening here on the island. But yeah, I'd say anybody who's watching off island, definitely the Isle of Man is the space to watch at the moment, with our grassroots initiatives, with things happening in the space. So if I haven't rambled on too much, I hope that does answer your question, that there's just so much going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you're constantly posting things out on LinkedIn. It's something that I wasn't necessarily aware of to begin with, but it does seem that there's so much activity already happening. So it's about harnessing that now.
No, absolutely.
And Lyle, it's obviously a big sign of confidence and something that you want to, give out that message. We are exploring this as a business sector. You've hired Chris now. What's the vision for Digital Isle of Man and the wider Isle of Man government with esports?
Well, I think, we've, as I said in the presentation, we want to create this centre of gravity. We've got such a wealth of experience in solving problems with these emerging sectors. We've had it with e-gaming, which had similar set of problems. As an island, we've recently looked at medicinal cannabis, and that's had an interesting journey as well, even in our financial regulation. So we have one of our strengths is to help legitimise and help support sectors in their growth. As it happens, there's quite a lot of, shall we say, more boring sides of the business that we do incredibly well on the island as well. Whether that's looking after the people, payroll, structuring businesses in the best way. There's an awful lot we can offer. So even outside of creating, which is a complete complex piece of work, regulation or a code of conduct, we have assets and businesses on the island that are perfectly able to support this sector. And what we can do as Digital Isle of Man is help them identify what those opportunities are and work as an island and Isle of Man PLC to move forward and support the sector, create that new way of working. And then it will build and grow itself. I think the opportunities are vast.
Fantastic. And Chris, I know you will probably roll your eyes at this one, but I would imagine that anybody else that's watching that's not necessarily as in-depth in their knowledge about esports as you would definitely recognise the brand of Fortnight. I don't have children, but it's something that I've just been bombarded with everywhere for the last couple of years. You say it's not really an esport, but I know there are lots of challenges around how that's currently operating. How does that sit within the esports world and the types of opportunities that you'll be looking for?
Okay, you better put me on a clock on this one so I don't go off for the next hour talking about this one, because it is something that I'm passionate about talking about and debating, and depending on when you catch me, I may have a different answer with regards to actually esport. Fortnite is an esport. The challenges that come with a battle royale or an esport or a game like Fortnite is that you've got 100 players playing at once. So you can imagine trying to orchestrate that and manage that in a way that can show that it's fun to watch the audience, because you've got potentially 100 different viewpoints to see at one time. But also Fortnite, their model is driven by, or largely driven by, selling additional items. So any parent that's watching this will have can relate to their son or daughter wanting more V-Bucks to buy more in-game items. And by that very nature, Fortnite needs to continue to create new content and new weapons or new items in-game. And I always use the analogy, imagine you were a tennis player and you're getting ready to play in Wimbledon, and the day before you're due to start playing in Wimbledon, your coach comes to you and says, look, we've decided to change the size of the racket, we're going to change the net, we're going to move the net up 2 inches higher, and you're going to be playing half the game on concrete and half on grass. And as a player that you'd been training and putting loads of hours in to be able to train at that professional level, obviously that would throw you. That's kind of what happens in Fortnite. They will make changes the day before contests or with very little heads up to the players. So it does have a lot of frustrations from teams that have Fortnite players in, but it's not to say that it's not a good stepping stone to young gamers to be able to learn about competitive games, because they do run their own tournaments as well. Like I said, it's something that I can talk about and debate for longer than we have scheduled here, but it's put competitive video gaming on the map. So when I do meet people and I say, oh, look, I work in esports, and they'll say, oh, you mean like that 16-year-old that won that $3 million is a perfect example. But as Lyle and I have discussed before, not everything is black and white as that. He didn't just get a $3 million check and head straight to the bank. So, I mean, we've talked about it before, Lyle.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think, whilst we can argue, and Chris and I have a number of times whether Fortnite's an esport or not, I think what you can't deny is that it does shine a light on some of the problems we have. So the teenager that won the 3 million, in actual fact, what he went home with in his pocket was far, far less. Are the tournament organisers really providing that duty of care to their tournament winners? Are they providing wealth management advice? Are they suggesting that they set up trusts and to be able to support them and make sure that they don't get bled dry? The amount of tax that chap paid in multiple jurisdictions, took a big bite. The amount that the tournament organiser took out. There's substantial work that needs to be done in terms of cleaning that up, and there are probably only a few bad actors in the industry, but it does only take a few to tarnish the reputation. So making sure that there's guidelines in place and that we know how to deal with that and people are being treated well is really important, and that's an opportunity for us.
Absolutely. And is that something that with your conversations with the industry they're quite open to and receptive around?
Absolutely. I mean, anybody that works in the esports industry a lot longer than I have, but they are extremely passionate about this industry. They want to see it grow the right way. They want to get rid of the bad actors, as you say, or prevent it becoming this Wild West, because a large portion of the world of esports is unregulated. And this is where I'm so passionate and fortunate to be able to have this position and work and do what I do, because the Isle of Man has got such a good track record in regulating other industries, and we're seen as leading the charge and having a gold standard in the industries that we do have a regulation in. So there are areas of the world of esports that do need this governance and regulation, and we're in a fantastic position to lean on what we've already done previously. And that will be welcomed, and it is being welcomed by those I've spoken across the world that work in esports, to be able to see, yeah, we're coming at it authentically. We want to see the industry clean up in certain areas, and we're also seen as putting value into the industry before we're trying to take value out. So this is why it's so important, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity to work with the grassroots scene, because that's what resonates off island when we're having conversations with people from the regulation side, trying to get them to the table for the 10. They do ask, well, what are you doing in your back garden? What are you doing in the esports industry as a jurisdiction, as an island, as a government, to show that you're putting value in before you're trying to take value out? And that's for anybody watching from their business point of view. They will be thinking, well, how do I break into the world of esports? And we're going to be running further workshops and focusing on sort of the business side. But the one thing to take away from this is, if you're seen as supporting the industry, and whether or not that's sponsoring a local tournament or giving advice to a young player, or if you can be seen as putting value in before taking value out, that's the best marketing advice I think that I could, or anybody could sort of give you in this industry, which is extremely protective and can be really reactive if it sees individuals trying to force their way in. So yeah.
The danger of combining passion and business, I guess.
Yeah.
We've got a question here, might be from a parent, about what are the dangers and risks of esports? Does it not encourage people to stay indoors all day and stay in front of their screens?
Really good question, and as a parent, I do have a little bit of insight onto that. From an esports point of view, it can be treated like any other sport, in that if you're not sleeping right, if you're not eating right, if you're not looking after your mental health, you're not going to be on top of your game. And this is where esports organizations likes of London United have been really focusing and doubling down on the importance of managing the health of their players, but also putting that message out to fans as well. So the stereotypical image of these guys that are playing professionally, that they don't see light of day, they just eat junk food, they don't know how to communicate, they don't know how to keep fit, is wrong. Because if you're going to invest, which is what they're doing, if you're going to invest in players, you're going to invest in this team, you want to make sure that they're going to perform as best as they can. And just locking them in a room for 12 hours a day and feeding them energy drinks is not going to get the performance that you want, which is why the esports industry over the last 5 years has been leaning on the worlds of traditional sports and learning about opportunities to coach these players better and give them the opportunities to thrive as professional athletes.
And it kind of links into one of the questions that we've got here, which is, do you feel as though the Isle of Man is or will be capable of producing talented esports athletes which could challenge top European or global competitions?
Absolutely. So we've got a really good track record as an island in creating awesome athletes. So, I mean, if you look at the snowboarding side of things, so we supported individuals that wanted to pursue a sport that, and anybody who's not from the Isle of Man, we don't have a lot of snow peaks over here to practice snowboarding, but we're able to identify individuals that have that passion to achieve greatness in whatever sport they want to achieve, give them the opportunities to have access to the right coaches and the right performance coaches, and help them go on to represent the island. And this is why it's so important from the grassroots side of things. You need to create these safe spaces for these individuals to be able to play and shine as individuals that have that special talent, and be able to nurture them. So whether or not esports is going to welcome and things like being at the Olympics or like being at the Commonwealth Games is another debate that we could talk about all day. But do I think that the Isle of Man can generate exceptional talent? Yes, and it already is. We've got young lad in Ramsey who he's part of a Williams F1 esports team. So we've got other talent that's come forward that is clearly getting on the radar. I mentioned London United, clearly getting on the radar of recognised and professional esports organisations, and if we can create that environment here where these orgs will look to the island for talent, that's only got to be a good thing.
I think, building on that, Chris has a phrase he uses a lot, which is sports is in our DNA, which I really like. And, one of the things we have here on the island is a fantastic cycling heritage, for example. You can use that cycling on esports. There's an esports platform called Zwift, where you cycle, you race. I do it myself, and you race at the weekends, and you can do it all within the comfort of your own home, which is a bit crazy when we live on the Isle of Man and you've got all these fantastic cycling routes and places to go. But it's a great competitive tool. And esports, building on the previous question, is not just about sitting in there and holding a joystick. There are more and more platforms that are available that are combining traditional sports such as running, cycling, rowing with a competitive gamification kind of platform. And I think we're going to see more and more of that as, fitness, and especially through the last 18, 12 months where people have been having to work out at home, these platforms are becoming more and more powerful and getting more and more users.
So would you say an esports athlete is more mindset or physical skill?
It's got to be a combination of both. So you've got to be able to communicate. If it's a team game, you've got to be able to communicate well with your fellow teammates. You've got to be able to compose yourself when you're going into a professional tournament. And if you're at that level and you've got literally millions and millions of people watching you play and watching every move you make, which is why it's so important to give these young people a safe environment and giving them the resources to be able to handle that pressure. So it is a mixture of the two, but as I've repeated and said a few times, and Lyle's just said it again, sports is in the island's DNA, 100%. So if we can take that and how we've supported other athletes and other individuals on the island in that raising their mental health game, I think we will really be able to shine the light on the island as a location to pick up that talent and nurture that talent.
Excellent. We've got another question from the audience here, probably for you, Lyle. What makes the Isle of Man a great location for esports-related activities?
So, good question. I think what we do need to consider is take away what people who are more familiar with the esports scene, take away the big tournaments. We're not looking at creating big stadiums here and filling them. That's always going to be done in other places. And as I said earlier in our timeline, we may have an opportunity to do that, but it'll be in a slightly different guise. We have an opportunity in two very clear areas. So the regulatory route, the ability to help support a sector, to legitimise, to grow, to weed out those bad actors. We can absolutely do that, but it's important that we do it in partnership with the sector. We don't just do something to a sector that doesn't want it. That's what the 10's all about. That's what that journey looks like. And the other thing that I mentioned is, and I keep referring it to as the boring side, but it's the back end of the business, which is still incredibly important, that the industry needs a lot of help with. Everything from the legals of, we've got young people who are competing for esports organizations that don't have particularly favourable contracts, that really need a bit more legal support to make sure that they're properly protected. We've got large tournaments being run that need to be managed properly, that you need to make sure that people get paid out properly. There's many stories we've heard over our conversations where teams haven't been paid for winning, or when they have won, they've needed to get the payout to be able to afford the trip home. The amount of money in this industry is surprising, given how much more it still needs to mature and grow and get some of these rules in place. That is something that we've got experience of as an island. In the last 20 years, a similar subset of issues we've had to deal with for other industries. And we can apply that knowledge to the esports industry, and we can really help them move forward at pace.
So if a business is watching now and they've kind of been sparked to their interest, is there a way that they can get involved? Is there an esports association as such?
Well, there is, and I did mention there's an esports association that is being formed independently of Digital Isle of Man, and that's fantastic. As Digital Isle of Man, we will have a second one of these presentations, which we'll go into down the rabbit holes of some of the business opportunities, and then we'll open up to a series of workshops where we have two-way conversations about what it is we can deliver to the Isle of Man. We're keen to package that up again as Isle of Man PLC, make sure we're all talking the same language, make sure we all know what we're going out with. But of course, very quickly, I'd imagine that businesses will, take destiny into their own hands, and they'll move forward, having that confidence of what it is we're selling, how we can support, and how to communicate and work with the sector, such as esports. Once we give them all of those tools, I expect that momentum will gather really quickly, and we'll be able to move that. Now, even if we didn't solve the regulatory side, because there is a real possibility that this is a sector that's not ready for that yet, and that's okay, and that's why we talk about code of conduct, and there's other vehicles and mechanisms we can use on that side. But even without that, there's still a lot of opportunity for our existing on-island businesses to grow in an adjacent sector to what they're already working in, and there is the opportunity. But yeah, for those of you that are looking for a big tournament on the island, it's probably not what we're looking for.
Never say never.
Never say never.
It processes away.
Exactly.
We've got another question here. Who makes up the 10 in the working group? And do you have anyone representing the banking sector or any of the other specific existing sectors in the Isle of Man?
Okay, it is a good question, whoever threw that in. The 10 is made up of some of the biggest names in the world of esports with regards tournament operators and developers. So these are the guys that are on the front line of esports, either making the games or running these tournaments. At the moment we feel it's important, and Lyle can, I'm sure, articulate this better than I can, but we're making sure that we get the feedback from those guys first, because those are the ones that are going to be helping us shape whether it's a code of conduct or a regulation. After that, or a second stage, that would be getting the input from local businesses as well. But we need to, when we're going and engaging with local business from a regulatory side, we need to have been able to listen and gather the pain points from the industry.
Absolutely. I mean, I think make no mistake about it, this is a very delicate sort of journey that we're on, where we do need to gather an awareness and to get the industry to recognise that there's a place that we can help. The 10 are highly influential, which is why we've approached them and tried to work with them. They will be brands that people recognise. They'll be brands that you would have seen earlier in the presentation. But we will talk about what's going on with the 10. We'll talk about what themes we're discussing. We'll do that through our partners of ESI, and they'll do the fly on the wall, but we won't be naming who they are. Good point around, is the banking sector involved? In terms of the 10, absolutely not. That's a pure, this is the heart of esports as a sector. The work we'll be doing on island, though, will be including everybody who feels that they have a role or something they can contribute or see an opportunity for their business. We're as keen to understand from, on-island businesses about where they see the opportunities as us demonstrating where we think there's opportunities as well. And it's by working together and bringing those two sides together and constructing the story and being clear about the path forward, which is really going to drive that opportunity.
Someone here has asked about education. Will there be any courses at the college? Someone told me that you can take degrees in this already.
Okay, I can't answer whether or not there'll be anything at the college. I'd love to see in the future that we do have educational opportunities in the world of esports, the same that's been happening all over the world. And you can take degrees in esports. It's a little bit of a hot topic at the moment in the world of esports because it's an industry which is moving so quickly. So if you want a 3-year degree as an example, there's an expectation and a requirement that the course material keeps up with the industry that's moving around it. So when you're a student and you come out at the back end of that 3 years, what you've learned is applicable to the industry, and you can bring those skills and bring that.
Sorry, Chris, can I so that would be on the business side of it, or would that be kind of for athletes? So
it's a really good question. So, and that's what's being debated at the moment as well. So, predominantly the courses at the moment are focused around the event management side of things, production, when it comes to, as we said, these big tournaments and these big events, learning how to get involved in that, but also the business planning of that. There are certain degrees that go into the back end of looking at the structure of an org. So I think the important thing to remember is while esports has so many moving parts and it is so fast moving and exciting, it is no different than a lot of other industries in that it also needs professionals and individuals that specialize in, it's not the boring stuff, but in things like marketing and legals and accountancy, because these guys need to get paid. They need companies being formed. And one of the great things about the role since I started is being able to get into local businesses and sit down and run presentations like we've just done on the world of esports and see those light bulb moments going off in these businesses, whether or not it's a law firm or a CSP, and they thought, actually, we've got experience in paying out large winnings, or we've got a payroll department, or visas is an example of some of the challenges. If you've got an organization, you've got players moving from one country to the next and trying to get into different regions, then you do need to be able to call on the services of somebody that understands the nuances and the paperwork side of things to get those visas approved and the right pathways. And a lot of the people that are in the world of esports, it's not that they don't want to get involved in this kind of thing. They've built their esports organization or their tournament operator effectively from their back bedroom. So they've had very little exposure to the world of business. And while sometimes certain people in the industry can be quite guarded, and they'll say, well, we don't need to listen to these other professionals because this is our industry. But that has started to open up a little bit more over the years, in that actually if we're going to keep this industry growing, we do need to listen to these professional service providers, these law firms, these corporate service providers. So any business that is looking for ways to get into esports, I feel you don't necessarily need to reinvent the wheel on what you already do. But what you do need to understand is how to break into the market there, how to communicate with these individuals authentically in the right way. And once you can do that and you can understand their pain points and you can understand their frustrations or their barriers, that's where you can start to bring value into the industry.
Yeah, I think building trust is a challenge, and Chris does this amazingly well because he's got such a rich knowledge set. But certainly when I sit opposite somebody who's in the esports world, one, I feel incredibly old, and they look at me very distrustfully, and building that trust takes some time. And I think that's one of the kind of pieces we need to impart with the on-island businesses we're looking to work with, how to build the trust. And it's not something you can just win overnight. I think we've done very well in the last 12 months in driving forward with our strategy, but without a doubt, not being able to travel off island because of COVID and not being able to have face-to-face with some of these organizations has been challenging because they don't know who we are, they don't know what we're after, and there's just a bit of a distrust about people trying to bring order to what's going on in the sector at the moment.
But if they do know us, if they know us and they're coming from the esports betting world, then it's, okay, we know about the Isle of Man. Yeah. We know that from a regulation side of things. But if you're in the world of esports and you've not been involved in the betting side of things, which is highly likely, then you may only know the island on the e-gaming side of things. And to some individuals or some businesses in the esports industry, that can make them a little bit cautious and wary. So we've had to do a lot of work on re-educating certain people in the esports industry that, look, we've got a lot of value to bring to this industry, and it's not just something to do with betting and gambling. And that's been really, really important, when to lean on the e-gaming side and when not to lean on the e-gaming side from a reputation point of view.
While we're talking about betting, I think it's a good time to mention as well, you know, we've touched on it in the presentation, but it's really important. You know, we do have betting on the island already. You can already bet on esports events, and that's something we already do. There's no problem in doing that. We don't have to do anything new. It exists. What we're looking to do here is completely outside of betting, where there is no code of conduct, no rule set, no regulation. You know, it's not that the scope of this piece is very much outside of the betting. That isn't to say we're ignoring betting. It's just that it's already taken care of. We can already do it.
Yeah.
Great. So we've probably got 5-10 minutes left. Just a reminder that if you would like to ask the guys any questions, then please do put your questions on Slido using Esports IOM. We've got a question from Eric here, which probably links into what we've just been talking about. For companies who are looking to be part of the Isle of Man gaming and esports community, what are the biggest challenges that the Isle of Man's facing, and what could you do with some help in?
Well, I mean, I do think that trust is one of our big challenges. As I've said a number of times, we're really fortunate that we've got Chris, who is very well embedded in the sector and is making a lot of noise about what we're doing here. What we are going to need some help with is us all getting together and try to understand again what is it we're going to sell. You know, one of the products that we're keen to try to pull together is that kind of list of what it means to work with businesses on the Isle of Man, what you can expect from them. We want to be able to create case studies of businesses that have been successful with working with esports, whether it's orgs or tournaments. We need to start exposing that we have this experience. So we're going to have the support of local businesses to help drive that forward. And we need their ideas because, you know, Chris and I have very different backgrounds and experiences. We do have other people who are supporting this initiative as well in the team. And we need to kind of glue all of those ideas together to get a really holistic approach that's solid that we can go out with.
Yeah.
Chris, are there any virtual or physical events that are kind of coming up on the Isle of Man for anyone that's interested?
Yes. So there's, off the top of my head, there is a Smash Brothers tournament taking place in a few weeks' time. That's at Tower House. There's online tournaments in Counter-Strike. One of the things that, if anybody is listening, is that is quite frustrating, and it comes back to that question. There is a lot happening on the island. What we're trying to gather at the moment is a resource that people can go to and list to this. And what it really needs is I think, whether or not it's a local journalist or a local publication, not being afraid to list these things. So if you look at some of the local media outlets that would list what football games are coming up or different sports, but they've been shying away from the esports side, or maybe they didn't know, but being able to get around the local activities from an esports point of view would be amazing. And what would be even more amazing is having somebody or groups of people being able to go and report these events. And that's where you start to really build on that grassroots scene, identifying that talent, identifying the rivalries between different players and different teams. I mean, you go to the Manx Esports website, they will tend to list a number of events that they're running. There are other local events as well. There's the Overdrive guys that do the Smash Brothers scene. So yeah, there is a number of events coming up, but we need to do better in spotlighting these to people that are interested, because one of the easiest ways to learn about opportunities in esports is attending some of these events. So if you're a business owner or if you're a parent, just attending these events and actually seeing the teamwork involved and seeing the competitive side and seeing how well they play together with each other does really open people's eyes to esports in a new way.
I was going to say, I think across the board, we can only kind of plant the seeds. For these things to grow and gather momentum, we need people on the island to have interest and to go to them, and that whether that's on the grassroots side, whether that's on the business side, on some of these education events, we'll try to kind of cater to the level of interest that people have, and I think it is important that if people are interested in attending events and knowing where they are, that they're going out and asking that as well, and making sure that they do turn up, because then we'll get more and more, our ecosystem, our grassroots team will get richer and richer.
Yeah, I mean, the easiest way, locally anyway, reaching out to people that you would feel have their finger on the pulse of that. The island's got a small enough community to be able to do that, and whether or not it's dropping me a message and saying, look, Chris, I'm either a business or an individual, can you give me a heads up of what's happening? And usually there's going to be something going on in that week or in that weekend. So yeah.
We had a question just then from Joseph Kennel. Do you have any advice on individuals who are looking to get into the industry?
Okay, Joseph, it depends on what sort of area and level you're looking at. Are you looking at getting into as a player, or competing in it, or the supporting side being a caster, or which is a commentator, or you're looking at bringing professional skills in there as well? So I would say, the best piece of advice is not necessarily try and rely on, if you're a gamer or a fan of esports, rely just on that passion. What value are you bringing in? So if you're an accountant, or if you're a marketing professional, or look to bring that value in, and approaching whether or not it's local businesses that, and you can bring that passion with you, but saying, look, I can come on board and help give that knowledge of this new industry, but also I'm bringing this other value in as well, which I know the esports industry is looking for. Just picking up the phone and having those conversations and not shying away from doing that is probably it's not a great answer, but that's what I would recommend. And I said the island's great for being able to do that, being able to reach out to people, business owners, and having that conversation with them.
Great.
Hope that answers your question, dude.
And if not, then reach out to Chris on LinkedIn. Yeah. He'll sort you out. We had a question earlier around the Isle of Man TT. So obviously the island's biggest known brand. It was around whether you see any opportunities to utilise something like that within the esports arena.
You want me to take that one?
Yeah, you start and I'll shift it.
There is a challenge with the TT game, being that it was never built with real competitive or esports model in mind. Last TT, we did our best with a virtual TT by bringing fans in, and it was more about fun content creation. It didn't have the professional integrity that would be required from an esports point of view. Years and years down the line, who knows what's going on with that side of things as they develop newer games. So they are working on a new game. There are no plans, as far as I'm aware, in the current horizon to do anything from a TT and an esports point of view, as far as I know. But I do know the new game is being built from the ground up with esports in mind, but we're not there yet, and we're not developers of the game.
Yeah, I think obviously the TT is a fantastic brand. It's a great opportunity for us to kind of merge what we're doing in this space as well as many others. We did have some fun with it last year. I think it'd be great to see that we have some kind of crossover events as we move forward. I've got no doubt that in 10 years' time there will be a esports sort of element to this, but we're certainly not there yet. We will continue to leverage every opportunity we can to kind of move this forward, whether that be the TT or anything else that we have going on the island that we can leverage.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Well, we are coming to the end of today's event. This has been really fascinating. As you said, it has been the start of a series of events, very much about the grassroots, the 101. This will be posted online as well, so that anybody who wants to have a look can go back and watch. I would definitely advise get in touch with Chris or Lyle if you have any burning desire to get involved in esports, or you want to find out more. In terms of key takeaways from today, Chris, what would you like to leave people with?
There will be areas that I've not touched on. So there'll be people watching this and who will be wanting to learn more. They already know about the basics. This is just the beginning of our run of educational events to educate local businesses on the island and also educate people off island that we're in this for the long run and we're doing it authentically. Other takeaway is not so much a takeaway. I just want to say a massive thank you, huge personal and genuine thank you to everybody who's tuned in, who's taken the time out of their day to watch this. It really means a lot, so thank you so much.
And Lyle, key takeaways?
I think for me, looking at some of the questions that are coming through, it really is around this. This is very complex. It's not necessarily easy to grasp in the first instance. We spent a year coming up with a strategy and trying to understand what that really meant, how it fit in with the ecosystem. So I do really I wouldn't be surprised if there's still a number of people scratching their heads thinking, well, what are you guys really doing? But we will continue to communicate about this. Come and have a look at the Digital Isle of Man website. There'll be more content from Chris, which I'm sure will be fantastic. We'll talk more about our journey, about what we're going to do, and obviously, get involved in those business sessions. And together, we'll kind of really get that clear path forward. And I'm sure that this is our opportunities to make the most of. And I think that we could really create a new, vibrant, exciting sector that people can get involved with and be proud of on the Isle of Man.
Absolutely. It's obviously a really exciting time for everyone that's involved, so it'll be very exciting to see what comes next.
Thanks, Laura.
Again, just thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate that it has been your lunchtime. Hopefully you found it insightful. This has been Digital Isle of Man working together with Isle of Man Business Network, and the next event that Business Network are putting on will be a whisky tasting. For more information on that, you can go to www.iombn.com, .im. And other than that, thank you very much and have a fantastic afternoon.